There are two stories, and they allow several questions to be asked. First story is about a man, we'll call him Omar. Now, Omar was a very, very pious man. He prided himself on keeping all of the tenets and dogmas and laws of the faith of the day. So one day, when he was visited by an angel, he felt as though all of his good works in being so pious were being rewarded. And so he had great joy at this visitation. But when the angel visited him, the angel asked him, please to go to a certain merchant in the town who was known for his philanthropic almsgiving, his selflessness, to tell this merchant that he was going to die in 6 months' time, but he would be taken directly to paradise. So Omar, priding himself now on being a messenger of God, went off to tell the merchant. And after he did so, the merchant doubled his philanthropic efforts. In fact, he gave away all of his goods, he sold up all of his merchandise, and after a few months, now being penniless, he was able to do good works, not just give out philanthropy. But after the 6 months passed, the merchant didn't die. So, of course, Omar, having gone around the town and told everybody that he was a messenger of God, was now found to be a paper tiger. And people shunned him, thinking he was a false prophet, and he was ostracized. He became more and more angry and more bitter inside. But then the angel came and visited him again and said, you see, Omar, in fact the message was quite accurate. Our friend the merchant did, in fact, die after the 6 months was up. And he did, and he is living in paradise. But what about you, Omar? What lesson have you learned from this? That's our first question. What did Omar learn from this experience? And the second story is about a demon. Oh, he was a very ugly fellow. Horns, fangs, talons. And he lived in a high mountain pass, and he ate the occasional traveller who came by. But it was a very lonely life. Down in the valley below there was a monastery, and he could hear the chants of the monks. He could hear the temple bell ringing. And he thought to himself, I wonder what it would be like to be good. So after this took hold on him after a while, and he decided he was going to do it. He was going to be good. So he made his way down to the monastery and confronted the abbot. Now, of course, the abbot was greatly surprised to have a demon come to visit with him. But when the demon said, I want to join the faith, I want to be one of you, the abbot, being somewhat of a worldly man, thought to himself, oh, a regenerate a regenerate demon, now that'd be a nice feather in my cap. But he had thoughts about it, so he said to the demon, well, you know, I have to confront the council about this. Give me a week. Why don't you come back after a week, and I'll give you the answer. But could I just make a suggestion to you that could you do something about those talons? Because, you know, they're going to impede your monk's robes when you put on the robes. So the demon went back to his mountain retreat, and with great pain he pared down all his talons till they were bleeding stumps. He spent a very painful week. But bandaging his stumps, after the few days he went back down to the abbot again, and the abbot saw the stuff and just had a little smile to himself, although he didn't say anything to the demon about this. But he did say, well, you know, I've spoken to the council about it, and they're quite undecided. Could you give us another week? But would you mind if I made another suggestion? Could you do something about those horns? Because you know, if you attain to that state which is above monkhood, it would definitely impede your ecclesiastical hat. So the demon goes back to his lair, and he chops off his horns and piles them down and scrapes them out, so there's bloody holes up on his head, and he spent a most painful week. His fingers ached and his head was aching, and he was just feeling decidedly poorly. But after the week he went down to the abbot, and the abbot congratulated him on this beautiful now head that he had, and he had good news that the council had decided that he could indeed join the monastery, but since he was feeling very poorly, why don't you go back until you feel better? And by the way, you know, those fangs impede your smile. Do you think you could do something about those fangs? So the demon went back to his lair, and with great pain and suffering, he pared down the fangs and poured them, as he had 2 gaping holes. But by this time he was feeling just terrible. You know, his fingers ached, his head was sore, and but you know, and during this last week he thought to himself, well, you know, I really don't think that I really want to just do good is just a bit too hard. You know. But anyway, he went down to see the abbot, and he said to the abbot, well, you know, I'm really having second thoughts about doing good, but I feel as though I'm dying, and I'd like to die in the faith. So would you admit me to the monastery? So the abbot allowed him to come into the monastery, gave him a little cell on his own, and even gave him 2 acolytes to take care of him. Well, the abbot was waiting, because he thought, you know, to have a regenerate demon was pretty good, but a demon who was dying for the faith, well, now that would be sensational. So the old abbot was waiting for the demon to die, but he didn't die. After a few days, he was starting to feel better. And the demon thought, well, you know, this doing good is not as hard as I thought. But you know, the poor demon was a little bit, you know, he was a little bit off with fairies by this time. But he was distinctly feeling better. And the abbot was a bit put off by this, you know, to see that he was obviously improved. But then the demon suddenly realized what it was. Why, his talons were growing again, and there were little horns coming out of his head. And his fangs were growing, you know, and You know, he felt distinctly better day by day. You know, even waking up in the morning and he'd test his little talons on the mat on the floor. And then he'd practice his grimacing in the mirror to see his little fangs that were coming down. But you know, when the acolytes were around, he made sure that he kept a straight face and big wide eyes. They didn't notice. He didn't smile because he didn't want anyone to see his fangs coming out. Then all of a sudden one day he woke up feeling so great, better than he'd ever felt in his life before, and without even thinking about it, when the acolytes came into his cave, he just gobbled them right up. And having a taste for them again, because that monk's gruel was pretty awful, you know, he didn't go for that very well at all. Well, as the priests came round the corner, he just gobbled them up too, and gnashed his teeth and took the marrow out of the bones. Oh, yum! And then the abbot came round the corner. Well, that was it, him too. Off he went. And so, feeling better than he'd ever felt in his life before, the demon went bounding up back to the mountain. But you know, it was a sensation, but not as the old abbot had predicted, because of course nobody dared to go to that monastery again, and it was enough to make 2 generations of people do good after that. But you know, even though the monastery went into rack and ruin, and cobwebs and started to, you know, fall apart, there was one old hermit monk that lived up in the mountain nearby where the demon had his lair, and he was the only one who had a philosophical and absolutely truthful summation to make of this little story. And that's our second question. First question is, what was the lesson that Omar learned from this encounter with the angel? And second, what did the old hermit monk make as his summation of this little demon story?
The first one was about trust.
Uh-huh.
He didn't trust himself,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't trust the divine, what he was told to broadcast.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So lack of trust and taking note of public opinion.
Yes, 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 yes. Mm-hmm. And the demon?
The demon, it's all in the motive. Never make a pact with the devil.
Uh-huh.
Maybe being proud of what we are when we feel we are on the right side of and good, we are not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just enough for us to shift in a place.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to worry about who we are.
Mm-hmm.
No feeling of being good.
And really, didn't we do that? Didn't we power down our fangs and break off our horns? Didn't we put on our nice spiritual garments for some long while? Didn't we? And what does it feel like now we've let them go now? It feels pretty good, doesn't it?
It's kind of like in both of them, people were trying to be something else other than themselves.
Absolutely right.
Concern, it's all ego stuff. And to me, the demon is, it's the nature of a demon.
Absolutely.
It's just the nature of things.
Absolutely.
You
Isn't
can't
it?
get the monk out of the demon, you get the
Demon out of the monk. So there's a purpose in these stories of demons over the last days, isn't it? And what we can, from our own experience, recognize from this. Thank you.